Hi everyone, it's Sonia here. So there is a rumor that COVID camps are being activated. The governor of Ohio says it's garbage, this rumor. It is being called a ridiculous conspiracy theory. But hey, in Quebec, where I live, our government is now using the police to arrest and forcibly detain people who are breaking quarantine. This is not an internet rumor. This is fact. And here is the Quebec City Health Director, Dr. Girard, in an interview explaining how, yes, they did it recently and they've done it before. So people have a right to be concerned. Also, thank you for supporting me on Patreon. Thanks for checking out the link below if you're interested in the ClO2 pouch, which eliminates odors by removing viruses, bacteria, fungus, and mold. Lots more info down below, so if you're interested, please click the link. If you do order, it's 15% off and no shipping and handling, even if you live in Canada. The rumor that Ohio is sending children to FEMA camps. Okay, so let's see what's really going on. So the Ohio Star originally reported that Ohio Department of Health Interim Director Lance Himes released an order on August 31st, which I will show you. Here is actually the Ohio Department of Health Director's order. An order creating federal emergency management agency shelters and legalizing their use for people who are, quote, unable to safely self-quarantine in their place of residence and to isolate those diagnosed with or showing symptoms of COVID-19. So these would be non-congregate FEMA shelters used for people who would test positive for COVID-19 who do not require hospitalization but need isolation. Those who have been exposed to COVID-19 who do not require hospitalization, and asymptomatic high-risk individuals needing social distancing as precautionary measure. So the questions are, what are the necessary actions to procure space? And they said, our hospitals are going broke and our previous spaces were never used and cost a lot of money to build. Why are we doing this now when the virus is under control? And what if a child living with a single parent is determined to have been exposed to COVID-19? Would the child then be taken to one of these shelters? So those are the questions that Ohio has. So where are they going to put these people and under what conditions, and basically what's going on? They do mention public colleges and universities are directed to make available vacant grounds. On March 20th, it says the state of Ohio and FEMA entered into a FEMA/state agreement applicable to the entire state of Ohio and authorizing applicants to apply for emergency protective measures, including non-congregate sheltering. I hereby order non-congregate sheltering to be utilized throughout the state and, as described above, and that's signed August 31st, 2020. So they definitely don't say anything about forcing people to go into these shelters. They make it sound more like it's a place to go if you have nowhere else to isolate yourself. But given what's going on in Quebec, is it such a stretch to think that these places might be used to hold people who break quarantine or detain people for some other reason? The CDC has quarantine stations all across America, as you can see on the CDC website. So CDC and FEMA obviously are working to make provisions and arrangements under the circumstances. Although, like the first article said, why now? When this is, as they said, under control, and they didn't use all these facilities before, because they did set them up, maybe not under FEMA, but they set up temporary hospitals and shelters, and they were just empty. So this is where the whole anxiety comes in, because there has been this thing online for a very long time of people being concerned about FEMA camps. Here's actually a map that shows you. It says FEMA concentration camps. That is how the person who made this labeled it, but probably it's showing FEMA facilities of some kind or other all across the US. And actually, if you go and look at the CDC and they talk about quarantine stations, so CDC and or FEMA, they definitely have facilities set up all over the country to quarantine people if needed. The worry is that, and this goes back many, many years, I've been around for all of this, There was a program back in the 80s called the Rex 84 program. There's actually a Wikipedia page on it right here. Readiness Exercise 1984 was a classified scenario and drill developed by Ronald Reagan and Oliver North to detain large numbers of United States citizens who opposed his funding of death squads in Latin America, and thus deemed by the political right to be, quote, national security threats in the event that the president declared an emergency. This was like back in those days when the US government was shipping weapons to the Contras in Nicaragua, and it turned out that the Contras didn't really want to use those weapons and fight their government. Like the US was trying to use that group to overthrow the government of Nicaragua, something like that. And instead, this group just sold the guns to the Colombian drug cartels and basically armed them, which is how they got to be, you know, as powerful as they are now. A lot of it goes back to that. That was a whole scandal. And so at the time, anyone who opposed funding the death squads in Latin America was deemed a political threat, a national security threat. And so, man, you feel paranoid now? Imagine if they had the internet back in 1984. People would have gone absolutely crazy. So the Reagan administration created these Rex 84 camps for real, which were all over America. And the goal was like to be able to detain tons and tons of people, which never ended up really happening. And over the years, they just kind of overgrew, and people have taken photos. You can find stuff online. You'll see the guard towers and some buildings and like a corral, kind of like an open air prison camp, you know, and that's what it goes back to this. Possible reasons for such a roundup were reported to be widespread opposition to a U.S. military invasion abroad, such as if the United States were to directly invade Central America. Imagine. So they had this plan to combat what the government perceived as, quote, subversive activities. The plan also authorized the military to direct ordered movements of civilian populations at state and regional levels. Existence of a master military contingency plan were originally revealed by journalist Ron Ridenhour, who summarized his findings in an article in Counterspy. Contingency plans by the U.S. government for rounding up people perceived by the government to be subversive or a threat to civil order have existed for many decades. For example, from 1967 to 1971, the FBI kept a list of over 100,000 people to be rounded up as subversive, dubbed the ADEX list. So, you know, that much is confirmed. The government does actually do that. They do actually make plans and keep lists and even build facilities. So it's not such a stretch for people to be kind of worried these days with all the civil unrest in America, thinking, well, how far is this going to go before the government starts rounding people up and putting them in these camps? Or maybe it's from COVID-19, even though, like they say, well, it's kind of under control now. So why would you be making these documents now? And then people start feeling like, well, maybe it's not really about the virus. Maybe they just want to contain us somewhere. I'm just telling you, this is probably why people are worried. Here is another document, though, that you should see. FEMA Emergency Non-Congregate Sheltering During the COVID-19 Public Health Emergency. Because remember, like those old abandoned Rex 84 camps, they've been there this whole time. And the list, it's been there since the 60s and 70s. So this is actually nothing new. And what FEMA is talking about here are non-congregate shelters. So it's important to look at what is a non-congregate shelter, because non-congregate means that people are separated from one another. So that's why they're talking about universities. The only way you can do this would be like in a dorm or a hotel or some other kind of facility like that, which is what they talk about in those documents. Anything like astrodomes and even Rex 84 camps or stuff like that, even a prison, this is a congregate shelter, I guess, unless you have everybody like individually in rooms. So basically, they're describing here everything to do with how they plan to use non-congregate shelters and, you know, how they're going to work this out with the local governments. It literally doesn't say anything about forcing people to go or taking their kids away. Okay, they say it's not what people think, but then there's this. CDC advises parents to prepare for sudden sleepover for school children. Oh, it's easy as ABC. 3 steps to protect your child during emergencies in the school day. Ask how you would be reunited with your child in an emergency or evacuation. Bring extra medicine, special foods, or supplies your child would need if you were separated overnight. Complete a backpack card and tuck one in your child's backpack or wallet. Well, okay, let's say if there was a hurricane or something terrible happened to the school, except that the CDC recently updated their website advising parents to prepare for a sudden sleepover for their children in case of a disaster, which could include COVID-19. The CDC advised parents to prepare for children to be detained overnight in case of disaster, listing COVID-19 as a biological threat that would qualify as a disaster. Let's just check. It does say right here, biological threats and children. Where does it mention COVID-19? It doesn't actually specifically mention COVID-19 here, but it does mention a worldwide flu outbreak or a bioterrorism attack. So it's just a couple steps to assume that maybe COVID-19 could be included on that list. You know, to me, it looks like this is like an emergency preparedness provision. It doesn't specifically say COVID-19, but, you know, coming like right at the same time as the order for the housing of people with COVID or suspected COVID in non-congregate shelters, I could see how people would make the connection. You know, you want to know my honest feeling? I've been around so much, so long. I've seen so many things where people were absolutely convinced this is it. They're gonna put us all in camps. We were saying that during H1N1 too. So you really just have to wait and see. I don't know what's gonna happen in America, but I do know that you have the infrastructure and you have the laws. And in Quebec, we have this too, and already our government is using those laws to forcibly detain people who do not obey quarantine. Is it going to go further than that? Are they going to detain other kinds of people? We don't know. But it's good that people are paying attention to this because it's pretty serious. Like, we have a bill here in Quebec, which is it's a real thing, that they can physically take you and forcibly vaccinate you. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's the bill. If they decide it's a public health emergency, and they want to, you know, draw on that bill, they can do that. They can just physically take you and give you the shot, whether you want it or not. And that's what we're worried about up here, whether they're going to do that. They're saying they're not, but they're also saying they haven't ruled it out. So, I mean, to me, like, I'm living here in a place where we're not worried about a FEMA camp, but we have this bill that's, you know, it doesn't matter if the vaccine's only been out for a couple of months and we don't know the long-term effects. If the government says we have to take it, they have the right to do that according to the law, you know? And again, we don't have a crystal ball. Are they going to use that law or not? We don't know. But I think it's safe to say that this whole COVID thing gives the government a lot more power, a lot more opportunity to use their power, and it makes people very uncomfortable. Yeah, so anyhow, let's just leave it at that. Let me know what you think. Just wanted to give you a heads up, but I wanted to give you like a fair view of the story, you know, and not put a spin on it. So I hope that information is useful to you. Thanks again for your support. Thanks for joining me in the chat. Don't forget to check out the link. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.